Okay, well, thank you. Now, diving in, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, working consciously with them. Gigantic subject. An awful lot of astrological territory embraced in those three planets, so-called personal planets. I always get a little bit of a laugh out of calling them personal planets. I'm not going to use that language very much because I have personally a very intimate relationship with Pluto. I bet you do too. In fact, I go so far as to say Pluto has been pretty fresh with me sometimes. And we have gotten profoundly personal. I've had to have a few long talks with Pluto and vice versa. So the notion that Pluto is merely generational while Mars and Mercury and Venus are personal, I find it just doesn't pass the test of self-observation. All the planets are personal. You have a personal relationship with every one of them. But we will discover that Mercury, Venus, and Mars, even though each one has a very unique character, there is a certain communality that links them together, and they're sort of a natural trinity for us to be meditating on for the next 4 days. And 4 days working on 3 planets might seem like, oh my God, that's a long time for 3 planets, but I think 4 years wouldn't be enough to really cover everything that we need to look at with these 3. Now, I did a talk, a very short version of this talk at the United Astrology Congress in New Orleans a year or so ago. I entitled it The 3 Poisons. And this is connected to one of the most fundamental doctrines in Buddhism. The last thing I want to do is proselytize Buddhism. You know, if you're a Muslim or a Christian or whatever, you're totally welcome here, and we're not going to be sectarian. But I find the Buddhist description of consciousness to work very well in terms of deepening or illuminating astrology, particularly evolutionary astrology. So I want to begin by talking about this doctrine of the 3 poisons. And the notion is that there is a root poison from which all the rest of our difficulties and our confusions arise. It's ignorance. Just plain old pig ignorance. I mean, if we could solve the problem of ignorance, you know, Congress would work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So ignorance, the root of all problems. And ignorance has 2 children. One of them is essentially attachment. We could call it desire, the lust for things. Give me that, give me that, give me that. If I had that, I'd be complete. And the second child of ignorance we would call either aggression or fear. Now, those are 2 feelings that often feel pretty different. You know, you're feeling aggressive towards something or you're feeling afraid. But either way, the object out there has become a trigger for antagonistic feelings inside of you. So the 3 poisons: ignorance, attachment, and aversion. Okay, 3 poisons. Now, as we think about this, with our astrological thinking cap on our heads, we see pretty quickly the connection with Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So what is the planet of ignorance and its cure? Potentially, obviously, Mercury, a planet correlated with cognitive kinds of functions. Planet of attachment and desire, there's the Venus function. The planet of aversion, the planet that correlates with fear or rage or destructiveness in you, clearly Mars. So the 3 so-called personal planets linked to these 3 poisons. But if we think about that, just in the context of the language I've used, it's a pretty negative view of Venus and Mars and Mercury, wouldn't you say? And I look at your chart and I say, oh, 3 poisons. So how do you feel? Poisoned, perhaps poisoned by my reading. Maybe you feel an aversion to my reading. You become defended against the reading. I've created an aversion in you. And that aversion to me saying your chart is poisoned, that might be a pretty healthy aversion, don't you think? If somebody looks at your chart and says there's something wrong with it, I mean, how are you going to digest that? It's complicated. If somebody holds the mirror before you and helps you see some error in your life, maybe we thank them for that. But there's a darker possibility. I have a friend, Lynn Bell, works in Paris. She's an astrologer and over there, and she talked about joining an astrology group in Paris when she first got there 25 years ago. And the people in this group, they'd get together, they'd pull a chart out, and their first question was, what's wrong with this chart? I mean, can we help anybody with that attitude? If somebody looks at my chart and says your chart is flawed somehow, there's something wrong with your chart, that basic common astrological message, you're doomed by your chart. If I hear that and accept it, I am truly doomed. I've given away my power to heal myself. And so I feel an aversion. I feel negativity towards that. I maybe I'll be polite to that astrologer, but inwardly I got my fingers in my ears, Don't poison me like that. Get away from me. Get away from me. Maybe that's healthy. Maybe I need to protect myself. Maybe my organism psychically and physically has a right to defend itself against invasion and destruction. Doesn't that sound fair? See, there's high Mars. It's not a poisonous Mars. Maybe kind of a dangerous Mars. So I'm angry at that astrologer. You have Saturn on the midheaven in Virgo, you'll never amount to anything. Got a kind of a dose of that when I was young, and it was close enough to the truth because of my fears and my insecurities that poison was almost like custom designed to hurt me. The idea that there are these insecurities in your chart. I've wrestled with them with some success over the years, or I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. That kind of astrology is so dangerous. So we do feel this urge to protect ourselves against it, and again, I want to name that healthy and necessary. And maybe I do feel some anger towards an astrologer who attempts to poison me that way, whether they know it or not. You think about that anger, though. Here's an odd statement, but watch where it takes us. Nobody in the history of the world has ever been angry at anybody. What we experience ourselves is not anger, but righteous indignation. This is what it feels like inside ourselves. I'm not angry in any simple sense. I am channeling the righteous wrath of God. It's not me who wants to kill you. Now, I'm glad we're laughing. I'm laughing too. But see, the nature of anger, even when it is necessary in life, is it has a kind of blinding effect. We rob the object of our anger of its humanity. We rob it of any possibility that there is rightness in its action. So righteous indignation, this blinding effect. Notice how already we're only a few minutes into the program, just thinking about Mars in particular, things have gotten very complicated. That's intentional. So, if somebody were sitting here and they raised their hand, so Steve, are you saying Mars is good or bad? I would say, you should probably go somewhere else for the next 4 days. Let me recommend Disneyland. I think you'll enjoy Disneyland, So we're letting Mars and of course Venus and Mercury too, we're letting them have their inherent ambivalence, that these are energies that are necessary to life, but they're also energies that have potential shadow sides, dangerous sides. And as we learn to work consciously with them, they become less poisonous. And the less consciously we're working with them, the more they toxify our perceptions, in Mars's case with rage and fear.